All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carol Peters, and I am so pleased to see so many familiar faces and names today. We have a great planned giving session prepared for you with our guest speaker, Wes Wicker, who serves as one of our 22 planned giving volunteers we call them faculty, and they also serve as mentors. We have a variety of people that we're going to introduce to all of you today. And there will be time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat and we'll be monitoring it, or you can simply unmute at the end and ask. There will also be some time for best practice sharing. So we encourage you to engage and be a part of the conversation. I know for some of you, you might be experiencing a lunch hour and not sharing your beautiful faces with us because you're grabbing a bite to eat, and that's completely okay. So my name is Carol Peters, and I serve as the CEO for United Way Next. I'm a former United Way professional. I served as the CEO of United Way of Greater McHenry County in Illinois for 5 years and retired from that role in 2021. I came on to the United Way Next team back in August of 2022. At the time, they were rebranding and renaming our organization from the retirees to United Way Next. And I'm proud to say it's been a 3-year journey and a ton of fun. And it's been just a pleasure working with all of you and getting to know so many of you. So I am going to first introduce Ivy Cirillo, who is a new member of our team. So Ivy, if you want to just unmute quick and say hi.
Hi, everyone.
And at the end, when Ivy wraps up the session with some information about future events, she'll also have a moment to formally introduce herself. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Denise Fleckenstein and Eve Powell, our facilitators for today's session.
Thank you, Carol. As she said, my name is Denise Fleckenstein. I was a plan giving professional for 20 years at different institutions here in the Detroit area. The last 12 years, I was the director of plan giving for United Way for Southeastern Michigan. And also I served on the United Way Worldwide Major Gift and Plan Giving Council for all 12 years. I am delighted to see all of you today. I believe very strongly that plan giving needs to be part of your strategy to secure your organization's work. And that's basically why I said, yeah, I'll be happy to be on the faculty for United Way Next. When I was on that council, I met my wonderful colleague, Eve Powell, and she and I have served for a long time together, and glad that she is co-facilitating with me. Eve?
Thank you, Denise, and hey, everybody. Glad to have you here today. So I have about a 25-year plus career, 20 of those at United Way. I started my career at Mile High United Way in Denver, and then I was at United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, and then most recently I served at United Way of Greater Atlanta for about 9 years, and there I did focus on planned gifts, but I also have a major gifts and other fundraising background. I am pleased to introduce our speaker today. I'm going to let him do his introduction, but he is also my colleague at Columns Fundraising, and I believe Wes at one point had my role at United Way of Greater Atlanta. So Wes, welcome. I'm going to turn this over to you, and again, glad to have everybody here today.
Great. Thank you, Eve. I'm one of the managing partners of Columns Fundraising. My career spanned a couple of colleges that I worked with. First as a lowly director of alumni affairs, who had the unusual experience of the first major gift I ever solicited, and I should say successfully solicited, was a planned gift. And before I really understood an annual campaign or United Way's campaign method or anyone else's, I got involved in an estate gift at the ripe old age of 25. It turned out to be an $0.5 million gift back in the 1980s. That would probably equate to a gift maybe 2 or 3 times that size today. So I started out my career really in planned giving, and then sort of worked the other way and got involved with United Way after a stint at a college, and as not only the first employee, but the first executive director of a small operating foundation. All along the way, I had the good fortune of meeting some donors who got involved with estate giving, and my first real major gifts were all on the planned giving side. So when I look back at my career now, 40 years later, I realize how unusual it was that the very first things I got involved in are usually the last things development officers get involved in their career, and that is planned giving and major gifts. So I'd like to look at planned giving. Carol, if you can switch the slide there, and I'll just say next as we go forward. So can everybody see the slide? Okay, good. I can't, by the way, so I'll just tell Carol next, and I've got it on my screen. So I'd like to look at planned giving from a perspective of taking the long view. And the old planned giving adage is the best time to plant an oak tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is today. When I first came to United Way and looked at the history of fundraising with United Way in central Indiana, which is Indianapolis, it occurred to me if they had put simply $1,000 a year back into an investment account, back into the 19 teens when it started, the administration and fundraising cost of United Way would be completely endowed by 1995, the year I joined. But United Ways historically had always looked at the short game, the short view of you raise as much money as you can in a year, you distribute it to a number of worthwhile charities, and then at a certain year, you start all over again and raise as much money as you can ad infinitum. Planned giving is a completely different mindset. And if you don't have a planned giving program, the best time to start one is today. Okay? So legacy giving or planned giving helps an organization's stability and supports its long-term goals. What do I mean by that? Envision, if you will, an organization whose endowment is so large that the earnings off the endowment underwrite or pay for on an annual basis your administration and fundraising cost. There are a couple of United Ways that can boast that point, that have endowments large enough that they are quote unquote an endowed United Way. And one I joined and had a hand in receiving a grant from the Lilly Endowment in Indianapolis is in fact endowed. Their annual expenses are paid for by their endowment. The value of that in Indianapolis when we were negotiating the original Lilly grant was that we could then go out to the community and market the idea that every penny of every dollar you contribute to United Way goes right back into the community because our fundraising and administrative expenses are covered by our endowment. That's a powerful message. When I was out on the speaker circuit for United Way in Indianapolis after the original grant came in, I would often be talking to groups, and the common question is, what is the percentage of my gift that is going to fundraising cost and overhead? And early on, we were very proud of the fact in Indianapolis, it was about 12 cents on the dollar, which was very good. And compared to many other nonprofits, it's a better than average, and in fact, a really good and low percentage. But when we're able to go out and talk about 100 cents of the contributed dollar going back into the community, and our fundraising and administrative costs were in fact zero, the message changed. and the mindset changed in Indianapolis. And I dare say that they are a much stronger organization now. It's been 29 years, about 27 years since that gift. Okay. So if we look at the types of gifts that I would consider planned gifts, I do consider appreciated stocks and bonds a planned gift, IRA direct transfers. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Last will and testament. And by the way, about 80% and perhaps more, but at least 80% of all planned gifts come from a simple will. So when you go to a planned giving seminar and you learn about CRUTs and CRATs and lead trust and flip trust, keep in mind, you don't have to be an expert, just be fluent in the language, understand the concepts. So if a contributor or their accountant gets into a conversation with you about the donor's CRUT or CRAT, you at least know what they're talking about. You'll probably never in your career have a contributor ask you to help them set up a charitable remainder trust. It's only happened to me about twice in 40 years. And normally what I do is get their accountant and a good estate planning attorney on the phone together and work it out. So that's a rarity. It's not going to happen much. Gifts of insurance policies, tangible property are pretty typical in capital campaigns, but I found with United Way, they were atypical. Most of your planned gifts, again, are going to come from last will and testaments. I will talk a little bit more, a few slides down, about the IRA direct transfers, because I think that's something that every United Way should be looking at and marketing. Okay. So a couple of recommendations that I think any nonprofit should consider as you delve into the world of planned giving is some policy on gift acceptance, or a gift acceptance policy, and an investment policy. In the gift acceptance policy, I believe that any gift that comes in honor of, an honorarium, or any gift in memoriam but they will be by nature a one-time gift, and they should be placed in a restricted fund or endowment, never to be spent, but invested for future earnings. Now, I'm sure your United Way gets gifts when, a prominent member of the community has passed away, or a family member gives a gift in honor of someone in their family, or in memory of someone in their family. Those are one-time gifts. And if those go into your annual campaign, they're figuring into your annual goal. And if it's a large gift, you're going to have an unusual spike that year in your annual campaign. So that's one reason I would put it into endowment. The other reason is it is, in fact, a one-time gift. And I think one-time gifts, like planned gifts, should be restricted and not part of your annual operations. Should have an investment policy, and the investment policy, I would recommend advises for a total portfolio return on the investment. I'm going to show you an example of what total portfolio return means. And this may be elementary to some of you, but I think it's worth looking at. The prudent man rule is something from Old English common law, and that was originally pertaining to churches and the management of church funds. And the concept and policy was that you would invest someone else's funds as a prudent man would invest his own funds. In other words, you're not going to buy cryptocurrency with your endowment. You're not going to speculate on wildcat stocks. You're going to invest the money for long-term growth in a fairly conservative 70-30 or 60-40 mix between stocks and bonds. The prudent man rule also called for the expenditure of the earnings each year. Now, that was common in colleges and universities all over the country literally for a couple of centuries, that every year, whatever they had in their endowment, they invested, and what was earned, they spent. The problem with that investment philosophy is the endowment never grows. So about 50 years ago, Harvard University came up with this concept of the total portfolio return, which has been enacted by probably the top 500 nonprofits in the United States, and any nonprofit that has a sizable endowment is probably operating off total portfolio return. And that is, you set an anniversary date once a year. For most nonprofits, it's December 31st. You're going to invest the money for a year, and whatever that anniversary date balance is, you're going to spend 5%. The theory is, and you can look at the history of investments of endowments from colleges, universities, and some United Ways, and see that they average earning much more than 5%. So if you just looked at it from a perspective of 7.5%, you spend 5% and the endowment grows by 2.5% each year. So the next year and all the succeeding years, as the endowment grows, that 5% number grows as well. So total portfolio return method has been the method of choice of most nonprofits today. What we see among our clients is that most of the investment policies call for a 4 to 5% payout. During recessionary times and during the financial crisis, 2007, 8, and 9, that actually bled into 2010 and 11. And then again, during the COVID years, we saw more nonprofits move to a 4% payout, protecting their corpuses and protecting themselves against an unusual year where the market drops. Okay. So here's an example of total portfolio return for an endowment. This is just a simple example of a $1 million endowment. Have an average annual earnings of 7.5%. The first year, you're going to spend $50,000, and then you see at the beginning of the second year, your balance is actually more than $1 million. Again, you invest that amount. Second year, earnings allow you to pay out more. 5% becomes a larger number for the second year payout, and the third year anniversary balance again has grown. So over time, your endowment's going to grow, the payout's going to grow, and as inflation occurs and things get more expensive, your endowment will be able to hopefully keep up with those expenses. You've probably heard in the news, if you read Chronicle of Philanthropy or any online newspapers these days, about a number of private colleges that have gotten into financial trouble. In fact, in Birmingham, Alabama, my old home state, one of the long, highly respected universities just closed, Birmingham Southern. They closed for a variety of reasons. One was overspending. The other was they were covering their overspending by raiding the endowment. But the third reason was poor management of their endowment funds. They were literally spending all of the earnings every year. And then when they got upside down financially with their operations, they in fact raided the corpus of their endowments to the extent that they could no longer pay their bills and went out of business. So the total portfolio return method hopefully protects an organization from overspending from their endowment. Okay. My experience is with most United Ways that you don't have a full-time plan giving officer. So what I would recommend is 5 things you can do if you don't have a full-time plan giving officer that can help you acquire plan gifts. One is to teach the development staff and the business officers how to transact a gift of stock. So distribute a cheat sheet to all of your business staff and the development staff that has the United Way account number where stock gifts are going to be deposited. What is called a DTC number, that is the number that a broker will use to transfer stock from the contributor to the United Way account. The United Way broker's name and phone number, so that everybody on the staff has it if they get called and a donor wants to give stock, they know how to transact the stock. It's also important that the development officer get the name and telephone number of the contributor's broker. Here's why. There's not a brokerage house in America that is obligated to divulge the name of the contributor when stock is transferred from the contributor's account to a nonprofit account. Granted, most contributors will call and tell you, I'm giving 100 shares of Apple to your United Way, but there are times when that doesn't happen and a transfer occurs. The business office doesn't know where it came from, so they just put it in the general fund, or they might put it in a set-aside account and get to it later. I had the experience at the Atlanta United Way where later meant about a year and a half later. When a business officer called me and said, hey, we've been sitting on this stock for about a year now and we don't know where it came from. You know, I about fainted. It was about $25,000 worth of stock. Fortunately for me, the stock had appreciated, not depreciated. But there again, there should be a policy. The standard rule of operation is as soon as the stock is transferred, it's liquidated. That way you don't stand the chance of stock depreciating and a donor being upset because what he or she intended to give you is now less than the stock value on the day of transfer. So you want to find out who their stockbroker is and ask them when the stock will be transferred, so you know when it gets to the business office whose stock it is. And most importantly, so you can acknowledge the gift to the donor. I had an occasion when I was at a university. A gentleman walked in between Christmas and New Year's when the entire campus was closed except the development office. So we rotated shifts, so the development office was open to accept end of the year gifts, which had a habit of walking in the door between Christmas and New Year's. This particular gentleman was elderly and he walked in with the actual stock certificate. Now, you're probably not going to see that in your lifetime, but just in case somebody hands you a stock certificate, you know, it's not an electronic certificate, but a printed piece of paper. There are a couple of things you need to do. One of them is you have to endorse it and have the donor sign the stock certificate with a statement attached to the stock certificate stating that the contributor, the benefactor, is gifting this stock to your charity. Preferably, it would be a notarized statement because it becomes a legal issue. Unfortunately for my staff member who received the stock, she didn't know that. So she took the stock certificate thinking she was doing the right thing and put it in the foundation safe. 2 months later, our foundation treasurer found it, couldn't figure out what it was, asked several people about it, and we found out that you know, a staff member had received this and probably done the right thing by putting it in the safe, but forgot about it over the holidays. The stock had depreciated 20% in the 2 months, and I can tell you, I spent about the next 2 months trying to salve the anger of my donor. So there's a process for all of this. Make sure everyone on the staff knows the process. Tip number 2 is when making a solicitation to an individual prospect, particularly if it's somebody like a Tocqueville member, I would add the sentence, you know, once they say, you know, I'm going to renew my Tocqueville gift or I'm going to increase my Tocqueville gift, this year, I would always say, have you ever considered making a provision in your estate plans to endow your annual gift? Or have you ever considered making an estate gift to United Way? I bet you would be surprised how many of your loyal donors may tell you, I've already done that, but you didn't know it. Or they may say, well, tell me about endowing my annual gift. So if your payout off your endowment is 5%, then every dollar you need to endow an annual gift is multiplied by 20. So 5% times 20 equals 100%. So a $10,000 Tocqueville gift needs to be a $200,000 bequest, and that person can be a Tocqueville member for perpetuity, long after they have passed. I mentioned this to a bank president one day because he said, we were talking about the United Way campaign and how many Tocqueville members there were at his bank, which at the time was Nations Bank, now Bank of America. And he said, the problem with United Way, unlike my university, is when I retire, you lose me. You don't follow me if I move to another city. You lose me as a donor because I'm not in the workplace. I'm not on your radar screen. So there's a shelf life to every Tocqueville member, and it's usually during their working career. And that's when I said, have you ever considered endowing your annual gift? Now, this is a president of a major American bank, and he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I explained to him that if he was given $10,000 a year, he could give $200,000 to the endowment, name a fund in his name, and he would be a Tocqueville member for perpetuity. He was stunned, and he said, gee, we're moving to Florida when I retire, so I'm not going to be around Atlanta. It's not going to make much difference to me. But can I name the endowment for my daughter who's just starting her career here in Atlanta? And I'd like to get her involved in things in the community. And it would be great. She can't afford to be a Tocqueville member right now, but gee, it would be great if she was a Tocqueville member. Then she gets to invited to all the Tocqueville events and rub elbows with the important people in the community. And so that's what he did. That was over a simple conversation. I received a $200,000 endowment gift. So those two sentences are pretty simple. I'm working with a organization right now, a national fraternity, and they have implemented the statement in every solicitation. Have you ever considered making an estate gift to the foundation? We've been doing this for about 6 months, and they've already landed $2.5 million just in estate gifts by asking that simple question. My third tip is that always consider who you are talking to that may be the best prospect for a planned gift. It doesn't have to be the wealthiest person in the room. It doesn't have to be the wealthiest person in your donor list. It's someone who's more likely than not been giving to United Way over a long period of time. The level of the gift really doesn't matter. If somebody's been giving to you for 10 years or more, they are a loyal contributor, and they would most likely consider a planned gift. Okay? So I would encourage you to produce planned giving literature. Your marketing department could develop that along with your campaign literature. Include a testimonial from someone if you have received a planned gift, if you've had somebody document a planned gift. Nothing is more flattering to a donor to go to them and say, I would like to feature you in our planned gift literature this year. Write a story about what you and your spouse are doing for United Way. And adding that personal touch to what is otherwise somewhat of a dry subject for a lot of people. A lot of people are superstitious about making estate plans because they think if I make my estate plans, then that means I'm going to die. Well, newsflash, everybody's going to die sooner or later. The mortality rate in the United States is still 100%. It's just a question of when. But people, the American public's sort of funny about that. They don't like talking about death, taxes, and the IRS. So, having a check the box on your pledge card, I've found is a particularly effective way to identify plan giving donors and prospects. If you send out 100,000 pledge cards in your city each year, I want to pre-warn you that you're not going to be buried in pledge cards that come back with check boxes on it. But if you send out 100,000 and you get 100, 0.01%, you got 100 prospects to follow up with. So I would include these 3 simple lines. I might consider including United Way in my estate plans. Check the box. Please send me more information on making an estate gift. Or 3, I've already included United Way in my estate plans. I can tell you that our clients who do this are always astounded at how many people check the 3rd box and they just didn't know it. So for every one of those boxes that gets checked, it gives you an opportunity to go meet and visit with a plan giving prospect. So the key to development and truly the key to plan giving is following up. I had the pleasure of working with one of the most dynamic CEOs in Atlanta who became my Tocqueville chair, not for 1 year, but for 3 years. He about worked us all to death, but the end result was well worth it. And then he became the Tocqueville chair for United Way of America. And he made a comment to me and my staff in a major gift meeting one time. He said, the purpose of your first meeting with anybody you're visiting with is to get your second meeting. So at every meeting, we found a reason to follow up with that person. And he made the comment that really stunned me. He said, I'm going to tell everybody in this room, I'm a really wealthy guy. So it's not going to surprise you that I get solicited all the time. What really surprises me is that most development officers don't follow up. The ones who follow up with me, I give them money. The ones who don't follow up with me, they don't get any money. That was a pretty simple equation in his mind. And I think it's a strong message that the key to being successful in this business is follow up. Okay. So who are your best prospects? I mentioned this earlier, longtime contributors, regardless of the amount of their annual gifts. I've had numerous cases where someone who gave my organization $25, $50 a year over a long period of time, when they died, they left a 6 or 7 figure gift. So think about this. And when I teach at conferences and things, I always have people, there's a pad of paper on the table in front of everybody's place. And I would challenge you to perform this exercise. Write down, you don't have to do it right now, but just think about this. I'm going to bet you, and I'm not a magician and I don't have ESP, but I'm going to bet you that about 7% of your net wealth is in cash. So here's the exercise. Write down the value of your house, subtract the mortgage, and that equity is part of your wealth. Write down the value of your IRAs, investment accounts. Write down the value of your cars, less any loans, subtract the loans out, and that's the value of your automobiles. Write down an estimated value of your jewelry and perhaps any property or artwork, tangible property or artwork that you may have. You add all that up and then write down the amount in your checking account right now and any savings account. I'm going to bet that amount is 7% or less. And this is the reason I ask you to go through this exercise. Most people cannot afford to make a major gift to your United Way. And that's why you get these participatory gifts of $100, $200, even up to $1,000, because people are making gifts from their cash accounts, not their assets. The assets are the value of the house, the IRA, the investment accounts, the jewelry, the cars. But they can only give you contributions from their cash flow. A planned gift is a gift from assets. They're not going to use the house, the cars, the jewelry, the artwork after they pass. It's all going to be liquidated and passed on. So the ability of $100 donor to make a $250,000 gift or larger as a planned gift is perfectly normal. And I can tell you one of the largest planned gifts we received when I was vice president of university was from a woman who had been giving us $50 a year over a 30-year period. When she died, she left us $1.5 million. She was not a wealthy woman, but her husband had crafted a very handsome IRA, and the value of their house increased dramatically over a 40-year period, and we received the entire estate. So that's how a $100 donor, a $50 donor turned into a $1.5 million donor. Most people in the United States plan their estate, write their last will and testament around 60 years of age. If they've written one earlier, which we would always encourage people to do, they generally revise it at the point in time they retire, so in their 60s. The other key thing to know is, and this law has changed and there's a mistake there, but at 70 years old, not 70.5, 70 years old, an individual can give you up to $100,000 a year from their IRA. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. The other group of people that I would tell you are prime prospects for planned gifts are couples or individuals with no children. Obviously, they're going to be looking for someone to give their estate to or their favorite charities. Okay? So here's a sense of urgency for you. We are now in what is being called the second golden era of planned giving. When I first got into fundraising back in the late 80s, there was a lot of talk about the golden age of planned giving because the greatest generation, the Depression era and World War II era generation, were aging out, as they say. Well, the baby boomers who were born between 1945 and 1964, of which I'm one, I'm sort of in the middle of that group, they are now on the youngest end, 60 years old, on the oldest end as of 2025 now. They are 80 years old. So let me tell you a little bit about the boomers since I am one. In fact, I'm in the bulge year of the baby boom. In 1957, the year I was born, there were more live births than there ever were in the history of the United States before or since. It's pretty amazing. So if you think about what was happening during World War II, when men were overseas, they came home, got jobs. Over the next 15 years or so, they had children, and 1957 was the peak year of that. The greatest generation was a generation of savers, and they generally lived below their means, unlike the rest of us who tend to live above our means. So they passed on an incredible amount of wealth to their children, who are now aging baby boomers. When I first got in the workforce in 1982, the Reagan tax cut, I believe it was 1982, installed what is now known as an IRA. They were 401k and 403b plans, but the IRA became fashionable in the 80s. So the boomers were the first generation to take advantage of tax deferred savings. That's significant because with their inheritance from their parents and their earnings in the 80s and 90s, the boomers made more money than any generation before them, and in fact made more money than the generation immediately after them in the late 80s and 90s. Interesting little thing. In our firm, we pass around articles and research on giving trends. And whether you agree with this or not, the macroeconomic tendencies or boomers is that we tend to be less motivated by giving to environmental causes, less motivated to give to DEI initiatives, less motivated to give online, although that is changing. I have gone to the dark side and actually made online gifts in the last couple of years. So GoFundMe type events really don't appeal to boomers as much as they do to younger generations. And to the benefit of United Way, boomers tend to give more to traditional household name nonprofits. So in terms of United Way getting involved in playing gifts, you got all these factors going in your favor. Okay. So I just want to make sure, Carol, is the next slide, because I can't see the slides. Is it demographics and giving? You're
Yes,
on
it
mute.
is.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
sorry, I was on mute and I couldn't find the button. Yep.
That's okay. So in terms of demographics, this came from Giving USA's report last year, and the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. So when I present this to audiences, particularly volunteers who don't work in fundraising on a day-to-day basis, they are usually shocked by these statistics. But 4% of all contributors. Now, the key word there is contributors to nonprofit organizations in the United States. Not 4% of the population, but 4% of people who contribute to nonprofits give 76% of all donations to charity. That 4% are people who make charitable donations of $5,000 or more. So if you're in that group, if you give away more than $5,000 a year, congratulations, you are in the top 4% of philanthropists in the United States. 10% of all contributors give 89% of all donations to charity. Those are gifts of $2,500 or more. So that obviously includes the first group of 4% and adds another 6% of all contributors in the United States. In my mind, those are fantastic numbers. And I use the word fantastic as more in the term of amazing or unbelievable, that such a small percentage of people who contribute to charities give such an overwhelming amount of the money. So one of our recommendations to all of our clients is concentrate on the people who give you the most money. Yes, you have to spend time on the smaller donors, but concentrate your time on the people who give you the most money. If you didn't know, retirees have a required minimum distribution, or RMD, at 73.5 years. At 70 years, they can give up to $100,000 a year, as I mentioned before, as a direct transfer. It's called a QCD, Qualified Charitable Distribution, to a charity of their choice, up to $100,000 a year. I will tell you that in my 40 years of working in the fundraising field, this is the single biggest change I've seen in donor habits. We're running campaigns right now, for $1 million to $3 million with clients who are receiving, 7, 8, 10 gifts, making up 60 to 70% of their campaign from QCDs, qualified charitable distributions directly from IRAs. I'm running one campaign right now. It's $3.5 million for an organization, a capital campaign. They're building a new property. So $3.5 million, 2.1 million that's been raised, came from QCDs. I mean, it's a huge deal. So I would include the information that if you're 70 years old, you can contribute through your IRA as a direct transfer, as opposed to withdrawing the money and then contributing it. Then they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So that's one technical point everybody needs to understand, is that the contribution needs to be directly contributed from the IRA to the charity, not withdrawn and then contributed to the charity. So those are the demographics in the world we live in now. And I hope you've picked up some ideas and points, and some thoughts on getting involved in plan giving. There's never been a better time today, unless you got involved in plan giving 100 years ago. So if you haven't started any type of plan giving effort, today's the best time to do it, as the baby boomers advance into their senior years. So I'm going to stop there. I think my last slide is questions. You have my email address and telephone number if you would like to talk after this call, but we have about 13, 14 minutes, Carol, if anybody has any questions or comments.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and open it up. And if there are questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to unmute. I know Denise and Eve have been watching the chat, and so have Ivy. So if anyone's got any and you feel comfortable asking yourself, we'd encourage that. Or even any feedback.
I know we had a question from Christy, so if she wanted to ask, she's more than welcome to. Otherwise, I can ask on her behalf as well.
Oh, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm joined by a cat, so if you're seeing some extra face on here on the screen. So my question, one, thank you so much. This was really enlightening. It also reinforced a lot of good practices, but also kind of helped me think about things a little differently. And when you had talked about endowing Tocqueville and had said gifts of 200,000, we usually recommend people consider a gift 25 times their annual amount, so that their Tocqueville Legacy Circle gift is 250,000. So I just wanted to put that out there to see what others do, and how you feel about that as the presenter. Thanks.
Yeah, I would encourage you to ask for 250,000 for a couple of reasons. One, your United Way may have a 4% payout, so it would need to be a $250,000 gift to generate 4%, which would be $10,000. The other reason I'd ask for it is the old fundraising adage of they will always talk you down, but it's a rare donor who's going to talk you up. In my career, I can remember one major donor who I asked for a gift, and he sort of chuckled and said, well, I was going to give you a lot more than that. And so it doesn't happen very often. I'm like I said, I can remember one time in 40 years it happened to me, and I thought I was asking for a big gift at $2 million. And he was like, I was going to give you 3, but if you only want 2, so I would definitely, ask for more rather than less.
Thank you. And we do the 4% payout. Occasionally, our foundation board will make an exception depending on the annual campaign,
Right.
results or other, to increase that. But also those gifts continue to grow. So even though the intention is that it's the $10,000 Tocqueville gift, once people have established their funds with us in the, following years, those gifts just keep going up, which is terrific. Thank you.
Right. Great point.
I have a question if no one else does. Is that okay, Carol? Um, Thank you so much, Wesley. That was very valuable to me. The opportunity to hear some best practices, and at the same time that I started my mentorship with a philanthropy manager in Florida. This is already a wealth of information. So thank you for that. I have a basic vocabulary question. When you say 4% payout, 4% payout to whom, to what?
So the United Way endowment would pay out to United Way to cover, whatever the board determines needs to be covered. It may go in the general fund, or it may, someone could conceivably give a large gift to United Way and restrict it to a particular program. Colleges and universities do that every day, with endowed scholarships and endowed chairs and endowed academic programs. So they allow somebody to put their name on a fund or on a chair or on a scholarship for a restricted use of the fund. But most United Ways that have endowments, the endowment's going to pay 4% of the balance once a year to United Way to offset your annual operations.
Okay, so if one was to make $1 million endowment, 4% of that would go to United Way per year.
Correct.
And so is that considered restricted funds?
The endowment's restricted. It's really in the donor agreement or that United Way's board to determine if that money is restricted when it comes in the door.
Okay.
In the case of Indianapolis, it comes into the general fund, or at least it did while I was there, and to my knowledge, it still does. And those funds paid for the operations of the United Way.
That's brilliant. And so when you say restricted funds, if one was to contribute $1 million, that is a type of, and the restricted language says only 4% can be paid. Is that right? Correct to say it that way?
Correct. So your board should have an investment policy and a gift acceptance policy that determines gifts like that and, how they'll be used and what the donor's rights are in terms of restricting a gift.
More often than not, the governance should include a policy already.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'd like to support Wes's comments about baby boomers and why you should pay attention to them. I am one. And through my life, I contributed to an IRA. And it is true that at some point I am going to have to take a distribution. And I don't want to give it to the tax man. So what I want to do is give it to my favorite charities, right? That's an important conversation. Just you're maybe asking them for a major gift. Find out if they have an IRA. This is the easiest way for a person to leave something in their estate plan to United Way. The easiest way. I can't tell you that. I talked about that all the time. It makes a lot of sense to people. They don't want to pay extra tax. Even if they give part of it to their heirs are possibly going to be paying tax on that. So
Yeah.
at least United Way should be able to get all of it or a portion of that IRA, and it will reduce the estate tax that would have to be paid, and depending on the state you live in and all of that. But that's a great conversation when you're just in discovery and you're talking to your major gift donor. Find out if they've got an IRA, because that leads to the next conversation. This is a great way for you to make a gift in your estate plan for the reasons I just talked about. So I support that wholeheartedly.
And granted, you know, when you're talking to someone, if you're talking to a 55-year-old, it really doesn't apply to them until they're 70. So, you know, as you're talking to donors, you know, bear in mind, you know, I don't ask people their ages, but you can generally look at them and get an idea of how old they are. And just say, you know, if, have you ever considered making a gift from your IRA?
The other thing is there's trillions of dollars in
Yeah.
IRAs.
Yeah. And let me tell you,
Trillions.
the US government is really happy about baby boomers getting older, because as we withdraw money from IRAs, you have to pay 10% right off the top. And then when you file your taxes, they determine, you know, what tax bracket you're in, and you're probably going to pay, most people are going to pay more than 10% of that IRA withdrawal. So it's a way to avoid that, and support your favorite charity. Yeah, my broker tells me in a couple of years down the road that I should never make a charitable contribution out of my checking account or transfer stock. I should just use that IRA account to make charitable contributions as much as I want, and use my other accounts for my day-to-day spending.
This is really great. So we're nearing the end of our time, and I just want to make sure if there were any last questions that didn't get asked, that we take at least one more.
So thank you, Wes. I really found this to be very informative and learning from everyone else. In that vein, I was curious, Carol, if you saw any benefit in sharing resources with one another. One of the things I love about our United Way network is that we try to leverage each other's learnings and expertise. And quite honestly, if we can find the easy button with some of the even materials and things like that, wouldn't it be nice to have and I was on United Way online to see if that existed, couldn't find it, maybe it's me. But at least within this group, might that be an option as a way to share resources, policies? I love learning from others, and I love leveraging the things that we've learned. So
Yeah, that's a great question, Holly, and actually dovetails into one of the things I was going to mention to everyone. As you're asking these questions, each of us are in different places in this planned giving journey, and these individuals, Wes, Denise, Eve, are part of our planned giving faculty who serve as mentors. They are excellent resources, so anyone can email me to request a mentor. This might be a one-time phone call. It may be, 3 months in a row, you meet for an hour, and after that, you're sailing along. They also have access to different policies. We can, peer-to-peer connections. I'm looking at Christy Shepard and others on the screen that I know have helped support. Christy's also part of our faculty. So we can make those introductions to make sure that we kind of are the connector in this equation. So we may not have all the answers, but we have the people who do know the information and can definitely assist. And I will say that Evelyn Morgner also does have access to some samples. And so we work closely with Evelyn and United Way Worldwide, which is why we've kind of taken over these planned giving learning sessions. So if it's beneficial for you to have a planned giving mentor, don't hesitate to email me direct. Ivy will be sending out a follow-up, which she'll mention here in just a minute, and it'll include my contact information. So last year we had probably 42 planned giving mentors placed through this avenue, and really each of them benefited in some way, shape, or form, whether it was an hour of time talking to a volunteer or it was multiple sessions just gaining additional information. And then we do have 5 other planned giving sessions set for this year, some of which are coming up in February, March, and I believe in April. So you'll want to register for those early. If you don't participate, we do send the recording link following so that you've got that to listen to afterwards, which can easily be done in the morning over your cup of coffee or as you're eating breakfast. So really great question, Holly. Thanks for asking it. I would agree that this is a rich network of people and resources, and we really need to work together and collaborate. So with that, I want to give Ivy a chance to wrap it up in case there's anything I missed, and take just a moment to say thanks again to Wes for the presentation and Denise and Eve for facilitating today. So Ivy, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So you probably received an email from me already for this event, but I am the new Marketing Communications and Events Manager for United Way Next. I was also a member, and I came from Sioux Empire United Way originally. I will be sending a follow-up email today with links to the recording, any contact information for Wes, and supplementary materials like the slides, anything that you might need, as well as details to become a Next member, plus next steps on how to get in touch with Carol for any planned giving mentorship.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ivy, and welcome to our team. We're glad you're here. And to everyone else, thanks for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next planned giving learning session.
Thank
Have
you,
a great rest of your
everyone.
day. Thank you.
Here.